All right, I'm going to walk you through the We Have Always Been Sovereign lesson and mapping activity. The video is going to live on this screen, so if you ever need to, you can come back into here and you'll be all set. This is our agenda. We are going to go through the presentation up to like slide 6 probably because of the addition of the video here. It's going to change some things up. Yep, up to slide 6. Then we're going to do some Minnesota reservation work. We're going to do some mapping reflection questions. We'll come back into the presentation, and then we'll go into our organizer and our reading. That's kind of the plan of attack. If you're ever lost, go to Google Classroom and view the specific instructionals for each of these activities. When we're talking about tribal sovereignty, this is something that we have already talked about. Sovereignty is just the right to have independence and self-control. If I make my own bedtime, I've got a sovereign bedtime. Now that I'm living without my parents, I'm not under their rules. I'm a sovereign individual. Tribal sovereignty is a little bit different. There are some tribal governments that are inside of Minnesota, which we're going to look at today. And we're going to see that the tribal sovereignty allows the right of self-governance, so tribes can make their own rules. It allows for those tribal laws to be tried under a tribal court system. So if I break a speeding ticket law on a reservation, I don't go to the Blue Earth County courthouse. I go to the courthouse on the reservation, and I follow tribal laws when you're on tribal land. And that gives control over the tribal land. This is something that's recognized by the U.S. government. This is part of treaties that have been renewed and ratified for decades and some for centuries too. And it's important because it preserves that native culture as well as identity. It recognizes the importance and the tribal history in the land. For Minnesota, there are 11 federally recognized tribes inside of Minnesota. 7 of those are Anishinaabe or Ojibwe tribes. Those are Red Lake, White Earth, Leech Lake, Fond du Lac, Bois Forte, Grand Portage, and Mille Lacs. And then there's 4 Sioux or Dakota communities. Those are Prairie Island, Shakopee, Metawanketon, Lower Sioux, and Upper Sioux. Now we're going to get into our activity for mapping sovereignty, and we're going to do this by identifying territories which are held by both the Ojibwe, the Anishinaabe, and the Dakota, the Sioux in present-day Minnesota. We're going to use Google Drawing as well as some maps in our textbook for our greatest success. So here is our Google Drawing. You're going to see that there are some Anishinaabe or Ojibwe lands in blue and Dakota Sioux lands in green. When you open this up into your Google Drawing, so I'm going to go into here to make it really obvious, mapping sovereignty Google Drawing. I hope I can find this because it's a little bit easier if I show you the real one than if I show you the other, but I guess not. So I'm just going to have to show you on this one. As you're going through, this is a Google Drawing, which just means that we have to double click things in order for it to open up properly as we're using it. I don't even see a Google Drawing option here. Let's see. This video is going to go on longer than I want. I will instead pause it and come back in a sec. All right, I'm back. So then we're going to be able to see here that when we're going through this mapping, we can click on one of the reservations, and I'm going to make sure that I've got my omnidirectional arrow and bring it on over. And if I think that this land, and I'm going to find the answer using the textbook and the map provided on Google Classroom, is Bois Forte, then I'm going to go ahead and put it right there. And I will make sure that your order is set, and you'll see that it's now labeled. If I think that this is Upper Sioux, I'm going to go ahead and put it right here. As you go through, you might have to adjust where you place these reservations, because then if I go off and find Grand Portage, well, they're going to overlap a little bit. So I can go through and remember that if you make a mistake or move something into the wrong location, press Control Z immediately, and it will be able to go through and help you out. Cool. So that's the Google Drawing. After we do the Google Drawing, we'll come back in. We're going to go off and do some reflection questions. Those are located right here. You'll have a Google Doc for it. It's the same thing. Of the 87 counties in Minnesota, how many of these counties do present-day reservations cover today? I'm going to put my guess here. These are counties. These are county lines. So then I would see if I zoom in by opposite pinch, this reservation is within one of these boxes, so one county line. This is in 2, and I can see that it would be in 2 counties, so now I'm at a total of 3. You'll go through and you'll identify how many of these reservations cross county lines, put your answer here. Generally speaking, which part of the state are the Ojibwe reservations? So I'm going to remember that Ojibwe is the same as Anishinaabe, so I'm going to see what part of the state, and I'll pick the direction, north, south, east, or west. Same for our Dakota reservations, north, south, east, and west. How many Ojibwe reservations are there? Select my number. How many Dakota reservations are there? Select my number. Next, I'm going to use the map, which is located on Classroom, to name 3 landforms or cities that touch each of these reservations and nations. So I could go through and, for instance, I know that Lake Mille Lacs is super close to this reservation, and this would be an Anishinaabe reservation, so I can type here that it would be Mille Lacs Lake. You'll go through, and if there's a city that's close to one, like we live here in St. Peter, well, that's kind of close to this location, so I would then identify St. Peter is close to whatever reservation or tribal land this would be. That's how to get there. After we finish that, we're going to flow back into our presentation for a hot few seconds. After we do our reflection questions, we're going to talk about what tribal sovereignty is, and we'll see that it allows for the governance over these items. And these are some issues that tribes balance out. And if you're creating your own laws and you have your own court system, well, you have to figure out how those tribal laws impact state laws. The treaty rights, specifically the usufructuary rights that we look at, and then how does economic development, which is part of our big research project coming up, really impact sovereignty itself. When we look at the importance of it, we'll see that it is used to help benefit Native American culture, the history. It makes sure that that relationship between tribal communities and non-tribal communities is strong and effective. There's been a lot of challenges that have been put onto Native American tribes, and allowing / recognizing / enforcing even tribes to have their own choices on the direction that they go for laws, for treaty rights, for the management of their own land, allows for those injustices to try to be rectified a little bit. It also goes through and supports some Native American self-determination. If I can decide what time I go to bed tonight, I have self-determination. I can choose to stay up really late, or I can choose to go to bed early. If tribes are allowed to have their own self-government, well, that allows them that choice, that free agency. It also encourages cultural diversity and understanding. By having tribal sovereignty, it allows for different viewpoints to come up. And there's not going to be much of a surprise that when we look at one of these maps and we see this reservation, well, this reservation physically is a lot smaller than Minnesota. And so just resource-wise, this reservation, or this one, pick any of the 11, has less access to resource than the state of Minnesota would. And using tribal sovereignty allows for these resources to be better managed and distributed to ensure that those resources help to diversify what the individuals living on those 11 managed lands have access to. When we do this Always Been Sovereign reading, that's a completely different video instructional, and that's actually linked on the top of that document. So this video will stop right here.